Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the Go 24/7 podcast. Bryce Koon alongside Glen West, and it is finally that time of year. Postseason baseball is upon us, and we want to make sure that you get all the information you need here on this podcast on the website. So to do that, make sure you subscribe to the Go 24/7 YouTube channel, or if you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere you get that audio, make sure that you turn around, you hit follow, you hit like, and so you know where to find us next time we release an episode, which hopefully, Glenn, we're talking about a regional win, and we're previewing a super regional. LSU, the number 5 national seed after a trip to Hoover, Glenn, that short-lived, but we talked about this last week. It was one of those things where you kind of felt like, what would you rather have? Would you rather play a lot of games, or would you rather play 2-3 games and get home and rest? That's boded well for the last 2 national championship teams. LSU's kind of hoping that's the case. So kind of your closing comments, your final thoughts, kind of on what happened in Hoover for LSU.
Yeah, I think probably the first and foremost thing that I wanted to see was just, could you find some arms that you could really rely on outside of Paul Skeens and Ty Floyd? And that really goes back to the Georgia series as well. I mean, you wanted to win that Georgia series because it secured ultimately your top 8 national seed. LSU is going to be the number 5 seed here, so they could potentially be a super regional host too if they get past this weekend. So it was good that they got that locked up, and a lot of it had to do with the bullpen. I thought really that road trip was great for those guys. You know, Thatcher Hurd, Gavin Guidry. I don't want to leave out any names, so I'll just cut it short there. But there were several other guys, and we'll get into it a little bit more, that I think you can really rely on. I think Riley Cooper is a name that you could certainly rely on come this weekend, and certainly next weekend if you're able to get to that point. So I think that was going to be first and foremost the biggest thing that I wanted to see. Nate Ackenhausen gave you nearly 4 great innings to close out that first game, and I think the if you had gone in saying that LSU was going to hold 2 teams like Arkansas and Texas A&M to 5 runs, I would have probably put money on LSU winning both of those games. I think probably the part that was a little bit disappointing was the bats. You know, the offense did not travel well this week, or that week in the SEC tournament. Only having 4 runs there over the final 2 games. Didn't get a whole lot of guys in. They had a lot of runners on base. They just didn't get a whole lot of them in. And so I think that was certainly a concern, that you hope that some rest and some preparation now over the next 8 days before you get started here, that will help kind of just LSU translate into what they want to do for this regional, starting with Tulane on Friday. But I think that you were able to learn a little bit more about your pitching. The offense wasn't great. We've seen them be much better, and we talked with a number of players after the selection show on Monday, and they kind of echoed those sentiments that we didn't have our best stuff, but we were a little bit gassed. We were a little tired there the last couple of days, and I think having this time to rest, to prepare, will really have LSU in a really good spot this weekend.
Yeah, and going back to the offense not travel well, I mean, you got to give credit, and I know fans, fanatics, you often look at your own team and your own shortcomings, but what Texas A&M did on the mound all week in Hoover was really impressive. Obviously rode them to a SEC tournament title game where they fell to Vanderbilt, so you got to give some credit there. I think you would like to see, if LSU gets matched up with a solid lefty somewhere in regional play or super regional play, you want to see, the numbers be a little bit better. But you mentioned, and what Glen's alluding to, and a good reason, we're going to put it down in the link below, link to the website, Go 24/7, where, Glen, you talked with some of the players, after the selections show, and Trey Morgan was really kind of upfront and honest, as he always is. A great interview, and gives you really good quotes about how this team was gassed. And you saw, Morgan, who had battled a little bit of a wrist injury. Gavin Dugas, who has just, kind of, just gritted through, it felt like the whole season after, an injury earlier this year. Hayden Travinsky has stepped up. So it's, it's a star power team for sure. If you just looked at, the cover of the magazine, when you see the big names, but when you see how deep this team is, what they've had to overcome, I mean, look, this it'll be 1 week since they played when they first pitched against Tulane on Friday. I mean, that is huge to see them get that break. And it brings us to the regional. In fact, Glenn, a surprise opponent in the Tulane Green Wave, which will be a lot of fun for people. Trey Morgan said it. He's probably going to have a lot of family come from New Orleans up to Baton Rouge for this. Tulane 19-40 into the season, but man, they went through a tear in the American Conference. And I caution people. You want to be playing your best baseball at the right time. Tulane's doing that right now. They're playing with house money, so it's still a formidable opponent. Another interesting draw, Glenn, Sam Houston State, which I think is a pretty solid, one of the solid mid-tier programs. And then Oregon State, which obviously has a great history in recent years of getting to Omaha. I remember the year they had Adley Rushman playing for the Orioles now, and that was a very fun team to watch for Oregon State. So it's a regional that I think you, me, Sonny, and Dylan texted immediately after and said, hey, you kind of feel good about, LSU with the draw they had when you saw some of the predictions. What is your kind of immediate reaction to the draw that LSU gets and what's going to be happening down in Baton Rouge this week?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it's a really good, kind of collection of teams that LSU will have here for the first weekend of the tournament. We'll dive into a little bit of each team here, just kind of some overall glancing thoughts, just on some quick research that I've done on each of them. But I like the draw. Look, Tulane, you absolutely kind of hit the nail on the head there. Tulane is a team that's 19-40. But really, they're 0-0 now. I mean, like, this is a team that you can kind of scratch what happened in the regular season. They're playing absolutely their best baseball of the season. That was something that Jay Johnson was asked about on Monday. And I think the biggest thing here for LSU is that they do have the reason that I think it's a little bit more favorable is that they've played two of these three teams this year. They've played Tulane. They kind of know what to expect in terms of arms and what their offense looks like. And then also Sam Houston, you played them in the second week of the year. So that, that'll help in terms of scouting, in terms of just having a preliminary report and a kind of a database of what to expect with those two teams if you get matched up with Sam Houston at all this weekend. So I think that is going to be really important for LSU just because they have some familiarity there with a couple of those programs. But Jay Johnson also said this yesterday, like, we played Tulane in the middle of the year. We played Sam Houston very early in our season. It might as well have been 4 years ago that we played them. These are different teams. These are teams that are all playing well. I mean, you have to play well as a 3 and a 4 seed at the end of the year to kind of scratch your way in to the tournament. And particularly in Tulane's case, 19-40 for the regular season, but they sure didn't play like it in the ACC tournament, and they just did a really, really nice job, against East Carolina and not the ACC, the American, right? The American is that
the AAC.
AAC. Yeah. That was. I mean, they've done some really nice things. They have a couple of hitters that I think you have to be aware of. T.O. Banks is a guy who's hit 18 home runs, leads the team in RBIs. They have Brennan Lambert, who's a really solid player as well. They have a couple hitters that I think will be able to do some damage here if LSU's not careful, and kind of brings me to believe, I think LSU is probably going to save Skeens, and we'll get into this a little bit more here in a minute, but just kind of an early gut feeling. I was talking about this with a number of people yesterday. Jay Johnson's not tipping his hand on what the pitching is going to look like. He's not talking about injuries this postseason at all. I think probably what a lot of us writers were talking about yesterday, I think we really like the idea of Thatcher Hurd getting that nod to start on Friday to open things off Friday afternoon at 2:00. And you kind of go from there. But I think it's going to be a game-to-game process for LSU, just in terms of evaluating, and that's kind of the structure of how Jays like to play out this season, is that they take it one game at a time, because they know come postseason that this is how you have to play, this is how you have to win, and so they're doing a really nice job, I think, of kind of instilling that mentality in the players. And now you kind of set your focus there on those guys, and just seeing what what you can do to have success against Tulane, and then you mark your territory throughout the rest of the weekend as it kind of pops up.
Yeah, and that was kind of the next question I was leading into. Obviously, the usage of Skeens, and people are going to be kind of, obsessing over that, especially the LSU fan bases. How is he used this weekend? Glenn, what's the balance? You don't want to take Tulane for granted, obviously. I mean, we just got done talking about it's a really hot baseball team, and it's also a team that's playing and feels way better about themselves than they probably did when they played LSU the first time. So it's not necessarily it's a drop off. We saw good pitching out of these guys from last week, but it does the roller coaster because the panic's going to set in the first walk or the first back to back singles or how do they balance? And how does Jay Johnson, use this pitching staff throughout the weekend? There were a lot of questions, obviously, with last week how it was handled a little bit. So, kind of your thoughts on that? How do you handle the pitching staff, especially in that first game?
Yeah, I mean, this is as battle tested a group I think that you could possibly have. I mean, when you go through the SEC schedule that they just did, going 7-2-1, winning four of your, I mean, all but one series at home. You win, I think, 3 of the 4 on the road.
Mm.
These guys have pitched in tough environments. These guys have pitched in home crowd environments where the crowd is on your side. And I think, look, the regular season has prepared LSU for this tournament and for this moment. But there are some logistics that you have to figure out throughout this week. I think probably the biggest thing for me is what the pitching rotation looks like based on who you face. I think we all know that Paul Skeens is the best pitcher in college baseball. Do you throw him out there game one and just try to approach it that way of securing the first game and then letting the rest of the chips fall where they may fall? I don't think LSU does that personally. I think that they set up the SEC tournament and the pitching the way that they did for a reason. I think that they really like what Thatcher Hurd could give them in that first game in the regional. And certainly also gives Skeens an extra day or two to rest that arm, prepare for whatever 2 or 3 seed matchup they would face in the bracket, whether they win or lose on Friday. So I think that is probably where I'm leaning towards, just because we've seen Thatcher now for several outings in a row go out and get it done. He had, I think, what was it? He retired the first 12 in Hoover,
12.
yeah,
Yeah.
against a very good South Carolina team, and it was really impressive. I mean, he ran into trouble there in the 5th a little bit, but I really liked what he did overall, and certainly he continued what has been a pretty consistent stretch for him where he hasn't thrown a lot of walks. I mean, that was the biggest thing, I think, in the middle of the season for him. He could not get the ball over the plate in control. And I think that was something that really kind of messed with him mentally for a little while, but he has done a really nice job of bouncing back. I think he's a guy that, that can certainly get you off to a good start Friday. And so I'm definitely looking at, throwing Thatcher Hurd on Friday. I think it just makes too much sense, and we'll see what LSU does from the rest of the weekend. But if you get an opportunity to go Hurd, Skeens, Floyd, to win all 3 games and get out of there without any blemishes, I think you're in a really good spot, because I don't think Paul Skeens is losing that game too. Whether it's you're in the losers or the winners bracket, I would imagine he'd be in the winners bracket, but. Yeah, I just don't see a scenario where Paul Skeens loses a game and then all you got to do from there is just win one more and you're pretty golden. So we'll see, but I think that's kind of the pitching rotation that I see LSU rolling out this weekend.
That's if Glen West was in the manager's chair for the LSU Tigers. I like it though, and it makes sense too, Glenn, because what you pointed out, and we talked about this a little bit. I know Sonny and I did as well. What they're going to face this weekend, it's no knock to any of the 3 teams that are joining LSU down in Baton Rouge, because all 3 of these teams could get hot and win. It's just a game of baseball. But I think a lot of us feel that what they faced in Hoover is way better, maybe not way better, but is better than what they're facing this weekend, just from the sense of offense, the pitching. I mean, it just is, and that's the result, and that's the challenge of playing in the SEC, like you alluded to. The regular season prepared them, and how they set it up, and Hoover may gave us a glimpse, because you are right. Jay Johnson's not going to peel back the curtain whatsoever on what is going to happen. You'll probably know it like Friday morning. That's when people are going to know who's pitching. So I like the tactic there. Real quick before we talk a little bit more about the opponents they have, the offense didn't travel well to Hoover. We mentioned that in the opening. What is your level of concern, maybe 1 to 10, about heading into this weekend? You mentioned the rest factor. You mentioned, some guys getting healthy. Obviously, the question, what is Tommy White back? I mean, that was something that a lot of fans on our board, on social media, were interested in that last game in Hoover. So kind of your thoughts on this offense, and are you more of just say, hey, guys, I'm going to stick with the course of the whole season. This is a really good offense. They're going to be back in Baton Rouge at home at Alex Box, and it's going to be okay? Or where do you sit in this?
I mean, I think they're going to be fine. If we're talking 1 to 10, I'm probably sitting at like a 4 in terms of concern level. But there have been some concerning trends recently, and it really goes back to the Mississippi State series. I mean, this has not been the offense that we've become accustomed to over the last several weeks. I mean, I think they would be the first to admit that there have been some struggles along the way. They've had some good individual games where they are hitting really well, and their play discipline is really solid. The South Carolina game last week, I thought they played
Mm-hmm.
really well in that first game in Hoover, but they backed it up with a couple of duds. To be quite honest with you, I mean, they just did not do a whole lot of good things. They struck out, I believe, 28 times. They went 5 of 29 with runners on base in terms of getting those guys in, and so that is just not the offense that we've become accustomed to seeing. This is a very disciplined offense. They draw a lot of walks. They get the free passes, but they also hit, and they hit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get them hitting, they are almost impossible to stop because of how consistent they've been in terms of getting guys on base and having the opportunities to score runs. Um, they 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 got a lot of hits in Hoover, but they just weren't able to turn those into runs. And I think that um, is a little bit of a concern, just because you never want to play with the baseball gods at this time of the year. You
Very
always
true.
want to make sure that you're playing some of your best ball, and I don't think that anybody in that offense. If you ask Coach Johnson, he certainly doesn't believe LSU's played their best offensive baseball the last couple of weeks. But the same breath, you have 8 days now to kind of rest, retool, reevaluate, look at things in a different way. And I think probably the biggest thing that's helped LSU is that they've had a number of guys step up in individual games. Like, Josh Pearson came up huge for them in the Georgia series. Hayden Travinsky was probably their best hitter in Hoover last week. I mean, he was the most
Mm-hmm.
consistent guy that they had at the plate, throughout the 3 games. You're going to have Tommy White back, for this regional. So, they just wanted to hold him out for rest. I don't think it was anything serious with him. I think he's going to be back in action on Friday against Tulane. So, no worries there. But you would like to see LSU come out with a little bit of a fire and a little bit of we're going to put this team down early kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentality from the offense. And so um, you ever want to let a number 4 seed hang around too long in a game? And LSU's had a couple of those the last couple weeks, couple midweek games. The loss to Nichols and then ULL. I mean, they kind of lost a couple back to back there to close the season, and so they're, you'd like to see them rebound and get back into the winners column against a team that they feel like they should be able to beat. But like we've said, early all season, it's really whoever comes to the ballpark and is on that day. And LSU has had some days recently where you can be concerned about what they're doing offensively, but I think overall though they're going to be fine. I think they're very much aware of some of the issues that they want to work on. That was one of the takeaways I had talking with Trey and Gavin yesterday. I think they're going to be ready and prepared for whatever's thrown at them.
Yeah, and I think too, Glenn, when you see what the preparation, the frustrations of the offense at times, the pitching. I mean, look, it's the ebbs and flows of a long season. I was watching the selection show, and I had social media up as well yesterday, and they talk about too, you know. it's also interesting how you see the narratives around teams change. A team like Texas A&M right now is a darling for everyone because of how well they played late. If LSU has, if they switch the last 2 weeks and the first 2 weeks of the season with the way they played, I know it's vastly different opponents. Then we're talking about a team that's coming in as the best team in the country, no doubt. So it's really just a tale of two seasons. When do you get hot? When do you kind of have that momentum? And you hope, obviously, that LSU can use it as a launching pad. Final piece right here. Let's get, because I know you had some quick tidbits. We're going to put a piece up tomorrow talking a little more in depth on each opponent. What can we expect? You mentioned a little bit about both teams. What's something to watch for each team? We mentioned Tulane. What's something that you're intrigued to see from Oregon State and as well from Sam Houston State?
Yeah, I think Oregon State has some really dominant hitters. They have a guy that's batting well over 370 for this season. 10 home runs, 53 RBIs. His name's Travis Bazana. They have a really nice, just kind of a really good lineup. They don't strike out a whole lot, and they actually get walked a ton. And they're that's kind of where they've kind of made their bread and butter. They have a really nice on base percentage as a team. Really, their top 6 or 7 hitters, I believe, are all hitting over 300 for the year, or around that margin for the season. So they're a pretty potent offense. I would imagine that LSU, should they get Oregon State in either a winner or a loser's game, for that game too, would absolutely intend to throw Paul Skeens against those guys. I
Mm-hmm.
think that has got to be the matchup that you're kind of calculating for if you're LSU, if you're looking ahead, if you're Jay Johnson. And I really like what they've done offensively. I think they're a really solid team. And then Sam Houston State has a couple guys batting over 400 as well. That seems to be kind of a trend here for offensive teams, or for really offense in college baseball this year. The numbers have been so gaudy for a lot of these programs, and certainly you look at guys like Dylan Cruz and Tommy Tanks, who are really having great seasons here for LSU, but you're seeing it all over the country, and so
Yeah.
these are very offensive oriented teams that are coming here. I think you look at the pitching for both. I would imagine is not. Maybe not quite what LSU has faced in the SEC, but still pretty solid. I mean, Oregon State is a 3-time national championship team. They have a great history there of recruiting good players. Sam Houston's a team that LSU beat earlier this season, but like I said, they're a very different team now. I mean, they're certainly on a little bit of a roll as well. Kind of close out their season, so it's going to be interesting. I think starting with Tulane on Friday, I think LSU is going to be in a position where they want to put it away early, like I said, and make sure that the crowd is not getting antsy halfway through the game, because I know a lot of these players are going to be juiced and jumped and really hyped up to be in that environment on Friday. So controlling your emotions, staying in the game mentally, preparing mentally for this tough weekend, I think is going to be first and foremost the most important thing for LSU to accomplish. And I think they have. We've talked all year, or really since the middle of the season. Does LSU have the roster to get to Omaha? And I think they still do. They have some pitching injuries. They still have some guys that are a little bit inconsistent, but I think some of the performances that you've seen the last couple of weeks lead you to believe that this is a team that can absolutely win this weekend, and that they can really do some damage next weekend as well if they advance. So I do think LSU's in a really good spot here, but you've got to get some of the offensive issues corrected, and certainly hope that you see some of the consistency from the pitching staff as well.
Time to put it together. There's no more time left to make mistakes. The margin of error is pretty razor thin, whether you're playing anybody in this. And we talked about it. You mentioned Sam Houston State, Tulane, very different now. They're on a roll. It'll be interesting to see, and I would like to be a fly on the wall on the scouting and the film conversations as they watch these teams, and then they watch what they did in their conference tournament, especially a Tulane team that I guess is when they're at the plate, it looks like a beach ball right now, and
Yeah.
they can't miss the strike zone as well. So it's going to be a lot of
And
fun
look,
to
I
kind of
mean,
watch
Oregon
this.
State's a team that has 5 guys that
Yeah.
hit double-digit home runs this year. Sam Houston is more of a hit for contact kind of team, but they drove in a lot of runs this year, and I think they're absolutely capable of putting up some big numbers. So, LSU's got to have the pitching stay consistent and really be a big part of why they win this weekend to have a chance.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and Glenn had a great piece. If you have not already, by the time you're listening to this, maybe you're listening to your ride home. When you get home, open up your computer, open up your phone. Glenn had a great piece talking with Trey Morgan about what it means to potentially, hasn't been talked about a lot, but the idea that if LSU doesn't get it done, this is the last time a lot of great players are going to play at Alex Box. And obviously, Tiger fans hope that that is not the case. They get another weekend out of them. But, man,
Yeah,
it's I said it
Trey
last week, Glenn. I said
Trey
it
had a
last
great
week.
quote. Trey had a great quote yesterday. He says about the losses the last couple years away from Baton
Mm,
Rouge. He says, "I remember the tears. I don't want to cry in my own dugout this year. I want to cry in Omaha because it's over and that we won." So that's I mean that's I think a feeling that I think a lot of players have on this roster because to be frank, LSU's not going to have a lot of these guys next year. They're
yeah.
losing a good chunk of their players that contributed to this season. They kind of know that it's the finality of this core group of Dylan Cruz and Trey Morgan, Gavin Dugas, Jordan Thompson, Ty Floyd certainly. They know it's their last run together, and so I think they're all keeping that in the backs of their minds and certainly want to get this done the right way through Baton Rouge.
It's going to be interesting. A lot of storylines heading into regional weekend, and LSU matched up with the Lexington regional. Keep an eye on that one as well if the Tigers do advance. Obviously, Kentucky hosting that one, but a lot of fun things to watch throughout. I don't know about you. I'm going to have several screens going on this weekend, Glenn. It's not going to just be the LSU game. It's going to be many different ones as well. But hey, my name is Bryce Koon. He is Glenn West. This is the Go 24/7 podcast previewing the regional. We're going to have great coverage all week and weekend, so make sure you subscribe if not already. Some good VIP content. We'll also want you to join with Glenn. I've only been on board for, I guess now I can't say only because it's been almost 4 or 5 months now. But some of the best conversation on a message board talking about LSU baseball or college baseball, it's a lot of fun. So if you want to be a part of it, you got to make sure you join and sign up there as well. Last but certainly not least, subscribe to the YouTube and hit us up on social media if you have any questions or you want to get more involved with the site. We can hit you up and let you know how to do that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and it's going to be a fun weekend in Baton